Gregory Hawkins did not lower his voice. He pointed across the polished marble lobby and said clearly enough for guests checking in and children clutching suitcases to hear, "Remove her. She's trespassing." Security moved toward Hailey Hawkins as if she were a disruption to be contained. A wife, standing in the hotel that carried her married name. Humiliated beneath chandeliers she had once approved on paper. No one in that lobby knew what the ownership records said. Gregory believed he was protecting his property. He was wrong. If you believe dignity doesn't need to shout to be powerful, stay with this story until the end. Justice, when it comes, rarely announces itself. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. And if you stand on the side of truth even when it arrives quietly, consider subscribing. Some stories deserve witnesses. Denver, Colorado did not announce wealth loudly. It carried it in clean sidewalks, renovated brick warehouses, boutique hotels with restrained brass signage, and people who understood that real money preferred understatement. The Hawthorne Hotel stood 3 blocks from Union Station, its facade a careful blend of restored 1920s stone and modern glass. It was not the largest hotel in the city. It was not the most expensive. But it was consistently full, quietly profitable, carefully managed. On paper, it belonged to Hawthorne Hospitality Group, LLC. And buried inside the operating agreement beneath subclauses and trustee authorizations sat the name Hailey Hawkins. Most employees had never read that far. Hailey stepped through the revolving door at 4:17 p.m. She wore a charcoal wool coat, low heels, and carried a leather notebook softened by years of use. Nothing about her appearance signaled confrontation. She did not scan the lobby as if searching for someone. She observed it the way an architect studies structural lines, without emotion, without hurry. The lobby smelled faintly of bergamot and polished wood. 2 guests checked in at the marble desk. A bellman adjusted luggage carts near the entrance. Soft jazz filtered from hidden speakers. Hailey paused near a column, letting her eyes move without drawing attention. She noted the following. Only 1 front desk associate on duty during peak hour. A bar tab left unsigned on the counter. A floral arrangement slightly wilted. A digital display advertising a leadership retreat executive suite block. She wrote none of it down yet. Across the lobby, Gregory Hawkins stood near the concierge desk, speaking to a man in a navy suit. He laughed too loudly for a business conversation. His hand rested possessively against the marble surface, as though proximity implied ownership. Gregory had grown comfortable in this lobby. He moved like a man who believed walls bent around him. Employees nodded when he passed. Vendors deferred. Guests assumed he was the owner. He never corrected them. Hailey watched him for exactly 12 seconds. She did not approach. Instead, she walked toward the front desk. Lauren Mitchell looked up with professional brightness. Early 20s, efficient posture, slight crease between her brows that suggested she cared about doing things correctly. "Good afternoon," Lauren said. "How can I help you?" Hailey's voice was calm, level, measured. "I'd like a copy of last quarter's occupancy summary." Lauren blinked. "I'm sorry for internal review," Hailey clarified. "Under Hawthorne Hospitality." Lauren hesitated. "Are you with corporate in a manner of speaking?" There was no edge in Hailey's tone, no impatience, just precision. Lauren's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I would need authorization from Mr. Hawkins." Of course you would, Hailey thought. Aloud, she said, "That won't be necessary. I'll follow up another way." She stepped aside. Gregory had noticed her by then. Recognition flickered across his face. Not surprise, but irritation. A tightening around the mouth. A calculation. He excused himself from his conversation and crossed the lobby. "Hailey," he said low and controlled. "What are you doing here?" The question sounded less like curiosity and more like accusation. She looked at him fully now. "I had a few things to verify. This isn't the place." A pause. "It is precisely the place," she replied softly. Gregory's jaw shifted. The guests at the desk pretended not to listen. Lauren focused on her monitor with exaggerated concentration. Gregory lowered his voice further. "We agreed you would stay out of operations. We agreed Hailey said that transparency wouldn't be an issue." A beat. He did not like that word. Transparency implied light, and light revealed numbers. Hailey hadn't come impulsively. 2 weeks earlier, she had reviewed a quarterly distribution statement from the Hawthorne Family Trust. The numbers were strong, but irregular. Consulting fees had risen 38% year over year. Executive discretionary expenses were categorized broadly. Several vendor invoices had identical formatting irregularities. She had not accused. She had not confronted. She had made 3 calls to the trust's external accountant, to a banking contact, to an attorney named Caroline Pierce. Then she had waited. Waiting was something Gregory mistook for passivity. He misunderstood many quiet things. Back in the lobby, Gregory gestured subtly toward the exit. "This isn't appropriate," he said. "You're causing confusion." "I've spoken to no one," Hailey answered. "That's not the point." The point in Gregory's mind was control. He had always managed optics carefully. Investors saw him as decisive. Staff saw him as commanding. Vendors saw him as the gatekeeper. Hailey, over the years, had allowed that narrative to exist. She preferred the structural side of things, the clauses, the protections, the legal scaffolding that made ventures sustainable. She had built the scaffolding. Gregory had decorated the lobby. Now the scaffolding was shifting. "I'd like access to the executive expense ledger," Hailey said evenly. There it was, direct. Gregory smiled without warmth. "You don't have operational clearance." She did not argue. Instead, she reached into her coat and removed a folded document. Not dramatic, not waved in the air, simply held between 2 fingers. "Section 4.2b, she said. "Managing member review rights." Gregory did not take the paper. His eyes hardened. Lauren, despite herself, glanced over. Gregory stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You're embarrassing yourself." Hailey felt the weight of the words settle between them. Embarrassment implied ignorance. She knew exactly what she was doing. "I won't need long," she said. He exhaled through his nose. "Go home," a simple command. Years ago she might have. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Out of choosing peace over friction. But peace built on incomplete information was not peace. It was postponement. "I'll wait," she replied. Gregory turned slightly, scanning the lobby as though measuring who might be watching. A corporate retreat group had begun checking in. Luggage wheels hummed across tile. A bartender polished glassware. Lauren typed, stopped, then typed again. Hailey stood still. She did not cross her arms. She did not raise her chin. She simply occupied space. Gregory saw something in that stillness he had not accounted for. Resolve. And beneath that documentation. Because what he did not yet know was this: Caroline Pierce had already sent a formal notice to the hotel's registered agent that morning. Preservation of records, electronic communications, security footage, financial logs. If Gregory forced a scene now, it would not disappear. It would be archived, time-stamped, filed. Hailey knew the trajectory of events before Gregory sensed the slope. She had reviewed the trust instrument again the previous night. In the event of fiduciary breach, the managing member could be suspended pending investigation. The clause was clear, objective, unemotional, like her. Gregory leaned closer. "You're not welcome in operational areas," he said. She met his gaze. "That depends on who you ask." For a fraction of a second, uncertainty crossed his face. Then it vanished. He straightened, decision made. Across the lobby, Marcus Doyle, the head of security, stood near the elevator bank. Gregory lifted his hand slightly. A signal. Marcus began walking toward them. Hailey noticed. Of course she did. She glanced at the lobby clock. 4:23 p.m. She would remember that time later. She always remembered times. Marcus Doyle had worked security for 17 years. 6 of them had been at the Hawthorne. He was not easily rattled. He understood the difference between a drunk guest and a real threat. He understood when a situation required force and when it required patience. What approached him now did not look like either. Gregory stood rigid beside Hailey, posture sharpened by something deeper than irritation. It was territorial, defensive, public. Marcus slowed slightly as he neared them. "Sir," he asked Gregory. Gregory did not lower his voice this time. "She's not authorized to be here," he said. "Escort her out." The sentence landed in the center of the lobby. A child stopped mid-step beside a luggage cart. The corporate retreat group quieted by a degree that was almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Lauren's fingers froze above her keyboard. Hailey did not look at the guests. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back. He saw no agitation, no erratic behavior, no visible intoxication, no raised voice, no confrontation. Just a woman standing upright beside a marble column. "Ma'am," Marcus said carefully, "are you a registered guest?" "No," Hailey replied. "Do you have business here?" "Yes," Gregory cut in. "She does not." Marcus shifted his weight. "Sir, I'll need clarification." Gregory's jaw flexed. "She's trespassing. I'm asking you to remove her." The word hung in the air. Trespassing. It carried weight. Legal implication. Public stigma. Hailey felt the gaze of strangers settle against her shoulders. She could sense the collective discomfort, people calculating whether to look away or continue watching. She did not defend herself. Instead, she asked Marcus one question. "Before you proceed," she said calmly, "will you please document the reason for removal?" Marcus blinked. Gregory's tone sharpened. "Marcus." Hailey continued unhurried. "And ensure the incident report includes the time, the directive given, and who issued it." Lauren looked up. There was no panic in Hailey's voice. No pleading, only precision. Marcus hesitated. "Ma'am," he said, "if you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to escalate." "I understand," she replied. Gregory stepped closer, lowering his voice enough that only the 3 of them could hear. "You're making a spectacle." "No," Hailey said quietly. "You are." For a brief moment, Gregory's composure fractured. "You don't own this place," he said. It was not loud, but it was audible. And it was wrong. Hailey did not correct him. Not here, not like this. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and removed her phone. She did not raise it to record. She opened the notes application. 4:25 p.m. directive removed for trespassing. Issued by Gregory Hawkins. She typed without haste. Marcus watched her fingers move. "Ma'am," he said more gently. "Now I'm asking you to step outside." A businessman near the concierge desk shifted as if considering intervening. He did not. The child's mother tugged her daughter closer. Gregory's face had regained its practiced neutrality. "You're done here," he said. Hailey slipped her phone back into her pocket. She turned toward the revolving doors. There was no drama in the movement. No last glance over her shoulder. No attempt to appeal to the room. She walked. Marcus followed at a respectful distance, not touching her. The lobby parted slightly to allow passage. The humiliation Gregory intended to impose did not unfold the way he expected. There was no shouting, no tears, no collapse. There was only stillness. And witnesses. Outside, the Denver air carried a bite of late autumn. The sky hovered between blue and steel gray. Hailey stepped onto the sidewalk. Marcus stopped just inside the doorway. "Ma'am," he said, quieter now. "Are you sure you don't want to explain?" "There's nothing to explain," she replied. A pause. "Please make sure the footage from 4:20 to 4:30 is preserved." Marcus frowned slightly. "That's not my decision." "It will be," she said. She held his gaze just long enough for the sentence to register not as threat, but as forecast. Then she walked toward the curb. Inside, Gregory exhaled. Control restored, or so he believed. He returned to the concierge desk, smoothing his jacket. The businessman he had been speaking with raised an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" the man asked. "Personal matter," Gregory said smoothly. "Resolved." The man nodded, though his expression suggested otherwise. Lauren stared at her screen but saw none of it. The words, Hawkins Trust ownership echoed in her mind. She had seen the file name once months ago while processing vendor documentation. Ownership, not management, not operations. Ownership. She minimized her current screen and opened the internal directory. Her pulse quickened. The file was still there, but access restricted. She glanced toward Gregory. He was laughing again, a little too loudly. Marcus returned to his post by the elevator bank. He had written hundreds of incident reports in his career. Bar fights, noise complaints, unauthorized visitors. He knew the tone required factual, neutral, concise. He also knew when a situation felt incomplete. He approached the security desk and opened the reporting system. Time of incident, 4:23 p.m. He paused. 4:23 or 4:25. He rewound the hallway camera feed briefly to confirm. 4:24:12 p.m. He typed carefully. Reason for removal directive from managing member. He did not type trespassing. Not yet. Across town, Caroline Pierce sat in her office, reviewing a confirmation email. Subject, notice of preservation. Hawthorne Hospitality Group. Sent 9:03 a.m. Receipt confirmed. Under federal and state evidentiary rules, once notice had been issued, destruction or alteration of relevant material could carry consequences. Caroline closed the email and dialed Hailey. Hailey answered on the second ring. It happened, Hailey said. Describe it, Caroline replied. Hailey did. Every detail, tone, volume, exact phrasing. Caroline listened without interruption. Good, she said finally. Good was not a celebration. It was an assessment. Do you have witnesses? Caroline asked. Yes. Did he state you were not an owner? Yes. Another pause. That simplifies things, Caroline said. Back at the hotel, Gregory entered his office and shut the door. He leaned against it briefly. Irritation flared, but beneath it, something else. Concern. Hailey had not argued. She had not threatened. She had not reacted. She had documented. That unsettled him more than anger would have. He walked to his desk and opened his email. Inbox 37 unread messages. Near the top sat one subject line he had ignored earlier. Preservation of records. Legal notice. His jaw tightened. He clicked it open. As he read, the color drained slightly from his face. Preserve all communications, financial records, surveillance footage, internal reports, and metadata relating to... The timing aligned too precisely. He stood abruptly and reached for his office phone. "AT," he snapped when the line connected. "I need access to security footage from this afternoon." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir," the IT manager replied cautiously. "We received a legal hold notice this morning. We've been instructed not to alter or delete anything." Gregory's grip tightened around the receiver. "I'm not asking you to delete," he said evenly. "I'm asking you to review." "Understood," the manager replied. "But access logs will reflect all activity." Of course they would. Gregory hung up slowly. In the lobby, the jazz music continued. Guests checked in. Wine glasses clinked softly at the bar. From the outside, the Hawthorne Hotel remained exactly what it had been that morning, refined, profitable, composed. But beneath its polished floors, the structure had shifted. Because what had occurred between 4:23 and 4:25 p.m. was no longer a private marital conflict. It was a documented directive, issued publicly, contradicting legal ownership, and archived. Hailey stood across the street now, watching the building without expression. She did not look wounded. She looked certain. Gregory believed he had removed her from his hotel. He had, in fact, escorted evidence into the open. Lauren Mitchell had not meant to get involved. She had student loans, a lease renewal coming up in January, a performance review scheduled next month that Gregory himself would conduct. She understood hierarchy. She also understood when something did not align. At 4:42 p.m., after the corporate retreat group finished checking in, Lauren requested a brief break and stepped into the small administrative office behind the front desk. The door clicked shut. The hum of the lobby softened. She sat at the secondary workstation and logged into the internal management portal's slower system, deeper access layers. She told herself she was only verifying procedure. Nothing more. She navigated to corporate structure. Access restricted. She hovered, then clicked Request Temporary Access. Reason Vendor Reconciliation Inquiry. It was a small lie. Clean, plausible. While waiting for system response, she searched the internal drive for archived onboarding documents. Employee orientation packets sometimes included sanitized organizational charts. She found one dated 3 years earlier. Hawthorne Hospitality Group, LC Managing Member. Gregory Hawkins, Primary Beneficiary. Hawthorne Family Trust. Trustee Hailey Hawkins. Lauren stared at the screen. Trustee, not spouse, not beneficiary. Trustee. Her pulse quickened. Trustees did not trespass. The access request was denied. She swallowed. Outside, Gregory's voice carried faintly from his office. Sharp, controlled, on the phone. Lauren minimized the screen and pulled up the incident report system instead. Marcus had filed the preliminary documentation. Time of incident 4:24:12 p.m. Directive remove per managing member instruction. Reason for removal pending clarification. Pending clarification. Lauren let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Marcus had not written trespassing. That mattered. She opened her email. A new internal message had arrived minutes earlier. From Gregory Hawkins. Subject Security Protocol Reminder. Effective, immediately unauthorized individuals are not permitted in operational areas. Any attempts to interfere with management should be escalated directly to my office. Maintain discretion. Lauren read it twice. Unauthorized individuals. He had not used Hailey's name. But the implication was clear. Lauren checked the timestamp. 4:31 p.m. 9 minutes after the incident. Fast, too fast, she forwarded the email to her personal Gmail account. Her finger hovered for half a second before clicking send. The sound of the outgoing message felt louder than it was. Across the building, Marcus stood at the security desk reviewing the hallway footage again. He watched Gregory approach Hailey. He muted the audio at first. Body language told enough. Then he enabled sound. She doesn't own this place. Marcus paused the video. Rewound. Played it again. Clear, not shouted, but audible. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He had never met Hailey before that afternoon. But he had worked long enough in private security to recognize something beyond emotion-legal exposure. He minimized the footage and opened the evidence log. Under notes, he added, audio captured managing member statement regarding ownership. Recommend retention. He saved the entry. He did not notify Gregory. Not yet. In his office, Gregory paced. Caroline Pierce's legal notice lay printed on his desk edges, already bent from being handled too roughly. Preserve all records. He hated the word preserve. It implied scrutiny. He dialed Daniel Brooks, the head of maintenance. Daniel, I need you to pull today's lobby footage and bring it to me. A pause on the line. Sir Yates said legal hold. I know what IT said. Daniel hesitated. Gregory lowered his voice. I'm not deleting anything. I just need to review it. Silence. Then, yes, sir. Gregory ended the call. He moved to his computer and opened the financial dashboard. Consulting expenditures, vendor transfers, GH Consulting LLC. He had structured it carefully. Layered invoices. Justifiable categories. Market rate comparisons. Nothing overtly illegal. Aggressive, perhaps. Creative, but not criminal. Unless someone read the trust instrument with intent. Across town, Hailey sat in Caroline Pierce's office, a quiet corner suite with frame degrees and minimalist decor. She had removed her coat. Her notebook lay open on the desk between them. Caroline listened as Hailey recounted the exact phrasing again. She doesn't own this place, Caroline repeated softly. Yes, and he ordered removal. Yes, in front of witnesses. Yes. Caroline folded her hands. That simplifies standing, she said. Hailey did not smile. She turned a page in her notebook and wrote, public denial of ownership. Her handwriting was small, precise. Gregory will try to reframe this as a personal dispute, Caroline continued. He may attempt to claim you were disrupting operations. I wasn't, I know. Caroline leaned forward slightly. The trust language is explicit. As trustee, you retain oversight authority. If we can demonstrate breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of funds, misrepresentation, suppression of access, you can move to suspend him as managing member pending investigation. Hailey nodded. Her voice remained even. Then we proceed. Back at the Hawthorne, Daniel Brooks stood in the maintenance corridor, staring at the security server terminal. He had known Gregory for 5 years. The man tipped well at Christmas, approved budget requests quickly, but he also cut corners. Daniel logged in. Lobby camera, 4:20 p.m. to 4:35 p.m. He watched the interaction unfold. No aggression, no raised voice from Hailey. Gregory's directive was unmistakable. Daniel exhaled slowly. He transferred a copy of the footage to the secured evidence partition marked Legal Hold. Then he printed a chain of custody form and signed his name. He did not take a copy to Gregory. Instead, he walked to Marcus's desk. Already logged, Marcus said quietly before Daniel could speak. They exchanged a look that required no elaboration. In the lobby, Lauren returned to her station. Guests flowed in and out. The bar filled gradually. Jazz continued to float through air scented with bergamot. Normalcy reasserted itself with mechanical precision. But Lauren saw the space differently now. Ownership was not always visible. Power did not always announce itself. And humiliation once witnessed did not evaporate simply because a man laughed loudly afterward. At 6:02 p.m., Gregory emerged from his office, expression restored to polished calm. He approached the front desk. Everything running smoothly, he asked. Yes, Mr. Hawkins, Lauren replied. He studied her face for a second too long. If anyone asks about earlier, he said casually, it was a misunderstanding. Personal matter. Of course, Lauren said. Gregory nodded and moved on. Lauren waited until he was out of sight before opening her email again. She composed a new message to Caroline Pierce. Subject Hawthorne, internal ownership document, archived. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. She attached the orientation chart screenshot. In the body of the email, she wrote only for documentation purposes. She did not sign her name. She pressed send. Outside, twilight settled over Denver. Inside, the Hawthorne's lights glowed warm against glass and stone. From the street, nothing appeared fractured. But within digital servers and archived folders, a record was forming. Timestamps, email trails, audio clips, statements made without calculation. Gregory believed he had drawn a boundary that afternoon. In truth, he had created a paper trail, and paper trails, unlike tempers, do not cool overnight. They accumulate, quietly. Long before the Hawthorne Hotel ever carried Gregory's voice through its lobby, it had carried Hailey's signature. Not visibly, not embossed on plaques or etched into cornerstone dedications, but in closing documents, in trust amendments, in clauses drafted late at night at her father's dining table while legal pads and fountain pens crowded out dinner plates. Hailey had grown up around balance sheets the way other children grew up around bedtime stories. Her father, Thomas Caldwell, had not believed in flashy wealth. He believed in protected assets, diversified holdings, structures that could withstand personality. Never build something that depends on charm, he used to tell her. Charm fades, paper lasts. When Thomas Caldwell died, the Hawthorne property was mid-renovation, an aging brick building purchased below market value with long-term potential. Hailey inherited majority interest through the Hawthorne Family Trust. Gregory inherited proximity. At the time, proximity had felt like partnership. Gregory was ambitious, persuasive, magnetic in rooms where investors hesitated. He understood presentation. He understood optics. He understood how to make a lobby feel expensive without overspending on stone. Hailey understood leverage ratios. She had believed the combination would work. For several years it had. Revenue climbed steadily. Occupancy rates outperformed projections. Boutique travel magazines featured the Hawthorne as Denver's understated luxury stay. Gregory stood in photographs. Hailey reviewed contracts. Then patterns began shifting. It did not begin with a scandal. It began with decimals. A 3% increase in executive consulting. A 5% expansion in discretionary hospitality expenses. An invoice for branding advisory from a firm Hailey did not recognize. GH Consulting, LLC. The initials had not struck her at first, not until she saw the routing number. She did not accuse Gregory. She opened a spreadsheet instead. 3 years of quarterly statements. Side by side, line by line. She marked anomalies in pale gray. When she finished, the page looked lightly dusted with ash. The Hawthorne remained profitable. That was the genius of it. Nothing catastrophic, nothing dramatic, just consistent redirection. Gregory had not looted the building. He had skimmed from its confidence. Back in the present, Hailey sat at her dining table, the same one her father once used reviewing printed bank records Caroline had secured through preliminary disclosure requests. The transfer dates aligned with large vendor payments. The vendor address traced back to a shared office suite in Boulder. Caroline had already pulled corporate registration filings. Registered agent Gregory Hawkins. Hailey rested her pen against the margin of the page. Her face remained calm. Anger would have been easier. Anger simplified narrative. This was more complicated. Gregory had not built the Hawthorne from nothing. He had contributed energy, negotiated contracts, recruited management. But somewhere along the way, contribution had blurred into entitlement. An entitlement left unexamined, calcified. Caroline's voice echoed from earlier that afternoon. If we establish breach of fiduciary duty, suspension is procedural, not emotional. Hailey appreciated that. Procedural. She did not want vengeance. She wanted correction. At the Hawthorne, Gregory reviewed the same numbers, but through a different lens. He sat in his office scrolling through the consulting transfers. GH Consulting had provided strategy alignment, executive development, brand positioning, all defensible. He had not hidden the entity. He had disclosed it buried within disclosures, yes, but disclosed nonetheless. He leaned back in his chair. Hailey would not understand the pressure of expansion, of competition, of investor expectation. He had earned flexibility. He told himself that twice. In the lobby, Lauren completed her shift and walked to the parking garage with unusual tension in her shoulders. Her anonymous email to Caroline Pierce weighed heavier than she anticipated. She had not included commentary, only documentation. But documentation could shift careers. In her apartment that night, she opened her laptop and searched public records. Hawthorne Hospitality Group, LLC. Ownership filings were limited, but older trust filings surfaced through archived business registrations. Trustee Hailey Ann Hawkins. Lauren leaned back. Gregory had said clearly, she doesn't own this place. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a denial. And denial, when recorded, rarely aged well. Across town, Marcus Doyle sat at his kitchen table with a reheated dinner cooling in front of him. He replayed the audio clip in his mind. She doesn't own this place. He had worked for men who bent truth before. He had also seen careers collapse over less. Marcus opened his laptop and drafted a supplemental incident memo. Per review of security footage and audio subject Gregory Hawkins stated that individual removed did not hold ownership interest. Documentation retained per legal hold. He saved the memo to the secured evidence file. He did not print it. He did not forward it. He preserved it. In Gregory's office, tension sharpened as he reread Caroline's formal notice again. Breach of fiduciary duty. The phrase irritated him. Fiduciary duty implied obligation beyond ambition. He had always believed growth justified flexibility. If funds moved from one entity to another but remained within his strategic orbit, was that betrayal or optimization? He stood and walked to the lobby balcony overlooking the bar. Guests laughed below. The Hawthorne hummed with curated comfort. He had built this atmosphere. Hailey had built the structure. He told himself atmosphere was harder. Down the street, Hailey closed the final bank folder and stacked the documents neatly. She opened her notebook and wrote 3 words. Pattern. Access. Statement. Pattern of transfers. Access to funds without trustee co-signature. Public statement denying ownership. Each alone might be manageable. Together they formed alignment. Her phone buzzed. A forwarded message from Caroline. Anonymous attachment. Orientation chart. Trustee Hailey Ann Hawkins. Hailey read it without visible reaction. Someone inside, Caroline texted. Yes, Hailey replied. She did not speculate who. She did not need loyalty. She needed accuracy. The next step would not be loud. There would be no dramatic confrontation in the lobby. There would be documentation delivered formally. Notice of review. Request for accounting. Temporary suspension pending investigation. The trust instrument allowed it. The numbers supported it. Gregory believed control lived in presence. Hailey knew it lived in paper. She stood and walked to the window. Denver's skyline flickered with restrained light. She did not feel triumphant. She felt steady. The humiliation in the lobby had not cut deeply. What cut deeper was the assumption beneath it that she could be dismissed publicly without consequence because she preferred silence. Silence Gregory had mistaken was absence. It was not. It was accumulation. Back at the Hawthorne, Gregory checked his phone. No new messages from Hailey. No angry texts. No emotional appeals. That unsettled him more than argument would have. He typed a brief message. We need to talk. He stared at it, then deleted it. Control required composure. He would not chase. He would manage this. He returned to his desk and began drafting a memo to the board about operational interference concerns. He framed it as risk mitigation. He always framed things well. But framing could not alter timestamps, and timestamps were already secured. Hailey closed her notebook. Tomorrow, Caroline would initiate formal review proceedings. Gregory would receive notice not as a husband, but as managing member under investigation. The Hawthorne Hotel would remain open. Guests would check in. Wine would be poured. But the foundation beneath Gregory's authority had shifted. He had called security to remove his wife. What he had truly done was activate the clause she had written years before. And clauses, unlike tempers, do not forget. The formal notice arrived at 9:12 a.m. the next morning. Not by email, not by text, by courier. A thick envelope stamped with the letterhead of Pierce and Whitmore attorneys at law. Lauren saw it first. The courier requested a signature. Lauren hesitated only a fraction of a second before accepting and logging it in the front desk delivery ledger. Recipient, Gregory Hawkins, time 9:12 a.m., delivered by front desk, L. Mitchell. She carried it personally to Gregory's office. He was already inside, jacket off, sleeves rolled precisely once. For you, she said. He glanced at the return address. His expression tightened, but he nodded. Thank you, Lauren. She closed the door behind her. Gregory waited 3 full seconds before breaking the seal. Inside were 3 documents: formal request for accounting, notice of investigation under fiduciary review, temporary limitation of unilateral financial authority, pending trustee oversight. He read each page slowly. The language was clinical. Under Section 4.2b of the Hawthorne Family Trust Instrument, the trustee reserves the right to initiate review and suspend discretionary authority where credible evidence of fiduciary irregularity exists. Credible evidence. The phrase irritated him. It implied substance. He flipped to the attached summary. Transfers to GH Consulting LLC totaling $482,000 over 3 fiscal years. Vendor overlap documentation. Executive suite expense waivers without trustee co-signature. Public denial of trustee ownership interest audio referenced. Gregory's jaw tightened. Audio referenced. So she had preserved it. He stood abruptly and crossed to the door, opening it. Marcus, he called across the lobby. Marcus approached measured and composed. Yes, sir. I need to know who accessed yesterday's footage. Marcus did not hesitate. IT logged preservation under legal hold. Daniel Brooks and myself confirmed retention. Gregory studied his face. Was any copy distributed externally? Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. Carefully worded. Gregory nodded once. Keep me informed. Marcus returned to his station. Gregory closed the door again. Temporary limitation of unilateral authority meant one thing: he could not move funds without trustee acknowledgement. It was procedural, yes, but optics mattered. If vendors sensed instability, negotiations would weaken. If staff sensed vulnerability, control would fracture. He picked up his phone and dialed Caroline Pierce directly. She answered. Mr. Hawkins. Her tone was neutral. You're escalating unnecessarily, Gregory said evenly. Mr. Hawkins, she replied. This is not escalation. It is governance. He exhaled slowly. These consulting fees are legitimate business expenses. Then the accounting will confirm that. And the public spectacle yesterday was documented, she said. A pause. You're aware your client entered operational space without clearance. Your wife, Caroline, corrected gently as the trustee. Gregory's grip tightened. This is a personal dispute. No, Caroline said quietly. It is fiduciary oversight. The line went silent for a moment. Then Gregory spoke again, softer. What does she want, transparency? He almost laughed. You could have asked. She did, Caroline replied. Yesterday, in your lobby. The call ended without resolution. Across town, Hailey sat in Caroline's conference room, reviewing a draft motion for temporary suspension of managing authority pending full audit. She read every line. Not because she distrusted Caroline, because details mattered. Once filed, Caroline said he has 72 hours to respond formally. Hailey nodded. And the board trustee meeting scheduled for Friday. Hailey closed the folder. No triumph crossed her face, only acknowledgement. At the Hawthorne, Gregory called an emergency management meeting at noon. Present Marcus Doyle, security. Daniel Brooks, maintenance. Olivia Chen, director of finance. Lauren Mitchell, front desk supervisor interim. The conference room smelled faintly of dry erase marker and coffee. Gregory stood at the head of the table. We are facing a procedural review, he began. This is administrative. It does not affect operations. Olivia Chen adjusted her glasses. Is this related to the trust audit? She asked carefully. Gregory's eyes flickered. Yes. Then finance will need to prepare documentation. I'll handle it, Gregory said quickly. Olivia did not respond immediately. Under trust, governance, finance typically reported jointly to managing member and trustee. Gregory continued. Yesterday's incident will not be discussed externally. It was a personal misunderstanding. Lauren felt the weight of the word again. Misunderstanding. Marcus remained silent. Gregory looked around the table. I expect unity, he said. We are not entertaining narratives that undermine leadership. Daniel shifted in his seat. No one challenged him, but something had shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, just subtly. Unity requested in the absence of clarity rarely feels stable. After the meeting, Olivia returned to her office and reviewed the last 3 years of consulting payments. She had processed them. She had flagged nothing because the authorization bore Gregory's signature. Now, under trustee review context, changed. She printed a reconciliation report. Not to accuse, to prepare. In the lobby, Lauren received another email from Gregory. Subject, revised incident report attached, was a draft update to Marcus's report. Reason for removal, disruptive behavior and unauthorized interference. Lauren read it twice. Disruptive behavior. That had not occurred. She walked to the security desk. Marcus, she said quietly, did she disrupt anything? Marcus shook his head once. No. Lauren nodded. Neither spoke further. Upstairs, Gregory sent the revised draft to Marcus for signature. Marcus read it carefully, then replied, Original report accurate per observed conduct. No disruption noted. He hit send. Gregory stared at the response. Defiance quiet but unmistakable. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. Across the road, he could see the sidewalk where Hailey had stood yesterday. Stillness unsettled him more than confrontation. He replayed the moment in his mind. She doesn't own this place. Why had he said that impulse? Irritation, assertion. He had meant she did not control operations, but words rarely bend after release, and audio does not infer nuance. Across town, Hailey received confirmation that the temporary motion had been filed. She closed her eyes briefly. This was not war. It was procedure. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Notice served 9:12 a.m. Management meeting expected reaction. Revised narrative attempt." She anticipated he would attempt to adjust documentation. He already had. That too would be preserved. Caroline looked across the table. "Are you prepared if this becomes public?" Hailey considered the question. Yes. Not because she desired exposure, but because she had nothing to conceal. Back at the Hawthorne, Olivia Chen knocked lightly on Gregory's office door. "I'll need trustee co-signature on outgoing transfers over $25,000, she said calmly. Gregory's expression hardened. "That's temporary." "Yes," Olivia replied. She did not elaborate. When she left, Gregory felt something unfamiliar. Constraint, not imposed by force, by clause. He had spent years cultivating authority through presence. Now, authority required countersignature. In the security office, Marcus saved the email exchange regarding the revised report to the legal hold archive. In finance, Olivia compiled 3 years of ledgers. At the front desk, Lauren continued greeting guests with steady professionalism. From the outside, nothing had changed. The Hawthorne still gleamed, but internally documentation had begun converging. Gregory believed he could manage perception. Hailey understood that governance does not depend on perception. It depends on record. And record once activated moves forward without raising its voice. By Wednesday morning, the Hawthorne felt different. Not to the guests. The lobby still carried the scent of bergamot. Jazz still moved softly through hidden speakers. Luggage wheels still crossed marble in steady rhythm. But to those who worked behind the front desk, inside offices without windows, and along maintenance corridors where pipes hummed behind drywall, something had shifted. Authority had become observable. Gregory arrived earlier than usual, 7:18 a.m. He walked the lobby floor with deliberate calm, greeting the early shift staff by name. He stopped at the bar to comment on inventory placement. He complimented a housekeeper on efficiency. He was reasserting presence. Presence had always been his instrument. At 8:02 a.m., he called a closed-door meeting with department heads again, this time without Lauren. Present, Olivia Chen, Finance. Marcus Doyle, Security. Daniel Brooks, Maintenance. Rachel Kim, Guest Services Director. Gregory stood at the head of the conference table, hands resting flat against polished wood. "I want clarity," he began. "There seems to be confusion regarding leadership structure." Olivia folded her hands neatly in front of her. Gregory continued, "The trust review is procedural. It does not imply misconduct." He paused. "But internal speculation can damage morale." Rachel nodded cautiously. Marcus remained still. Daniel avoided eye contact. Gregory's gaze shifted from one to the other. "If any of you have concerns," he said, "you bring them to me. Not externally, not through back channels." The phrasing was careful, not an accusation, a boundary. Olivia spoke first. With respect, she said evenly, the trustee initiated review. "That is not external." A small silence followed. Gregory's jaw tightened slightly. "Hailey is not involved in day-to-day operations, but she is trustee," Olivia replied. Gregory inhaled slowly. "And that distinction is being leveraged." Marcus spoke then, voice low. "My responsibility is safety and compliance." And Gregory prompted, "An accurate reporting." Gregory's eyes shifted to him. "You're implying inaccuracy. I'm stating responsibility." The air grew heavier. Gregory changed tactics. Yesterday's incident, he said, has been exaggerated. Rachel glanced between them. Exaggerated? How, she asked. She arrived without notice. Gregory replied, requested confidential documents in the lobby. That's disruptive. Marcus did not respond immediately. She requested documentation, he said finally. She did not raise her voice. Gregory's tone sharpened. Security decisions are mine. Security documentation is mine, Marcus replied. Silence again. Gregory studied each face in turn. He saw something he had not seen before. Not rebellion, not defiance, but distance. A slight withdrawal. It unsettled him. Very well, he said at last. We will allow the review process to conclude. Until then, operations proceed normally. Meeting adjourned. Outside the conference room, Daniel exhaled deeply. Rachel whispered to Olivia. Is this serious? Olivia answered without emotion. Yes. Back in her office, Olivia reopened the reconciliation report. She ran a cross-reference between GH Consulting and vendor codes. There it was. Multiple payments categorized under strategic advisory that aligned with personal travel reimbursements. Nothing explosive, but enough to question. She printed a clean copy and placed it in a folder labeled Trustee Review. In the security office, Marcus received an automated notification. External audit request pending. He clicked into the system. A formal subpoena for footage access was being processed. This was no longer theoretical. It was procedural. He reviewed the hallway footage again. Gregory's voice echoed clearly. She doesn't own this place. Marcus paused the frame on Gregory's expression. Not confused, not mistaken. Certain. That certainty would matter. Upstairs, Gregory sat alone in his office staring at his reflection in the darkened monitor. He replayed the meeting in his mind. They were not openly opposing him, but they were not aligning either. Control was never about volume. It was about confidence. And confidence fractured quietly. He opened his email and began drafting a message to the board. Subject, clarification regarding trustee review. He framed it as proactive governance. He emphasized business growth. He minimized financial discrepancies as standard strategic structuring. He did not mention the lobby incident. He hit send. Across town, Hailey sat at her dining table once more, reviewing the forwarded board memo Caroline had obtained through disclosure channels. Gregory's language was polished, measured, strategic. He positioned the review as routine. She did not react. Instead, she turned to a printed transcript Caroline's paralegal had prepared from the audio clip. 4:24:38 p.m. Gregory Hawkins, she doesn't own this place. Hailey traced the timestamp with her finger. She felt no anger, only confirmation. Words spoken publicly often reveal internal belief. Gregory did not merely misunderstand governance. He believed ownership followed performance, not paper. That belief had guided his decisions, and that belief would now be tested. Caroline entered the room carrying another file. Preliminary bank verification complete, she said. Hailey looked up. And the consulting entity is wholly controlled by Gregory, I assumed. Yes, Caroline replied. But assumption is not evidence. Now we have documentation. Hailey nodded. What about staff statements? Marcus submitted supplemental notes voluntarily. We have an internal email indicating attempted revision of incident report language. Hailey's expression remained steady. Was it revised? No. It was declined. Good. Not because it vindicated her, but because it preserved integrity. Back at the Hawthorne, Lauren received a quiet message from Olivia. Can you confirm exact time of removal? Lauren checked the front desk log. 4:24 p.m. She replied with the timestamp and attached a screenshot of the entry she had made when the courier arrived earlier. Documentation was accumulating from multiple angles. Gregory sensed it. By afternoon, he walked the halls with sharper movements. He paused outside finance longer than necessary. He stopped by security twice. He checked the server room access log. Each inquiry was polite. Each carried weight. At 3:17 p.m., Daniel Brooks knocked on Gregory's office door. Yes, external auditor scheduled for Friday, Daniel said. They'll need server access. Gregory nodded once. Fine. Daniel hesitated. Sir? The footage is preserved, Gregory cut in. I'm aware. Daniel left. Gregory leaned back in his chair. He had not committed fraud. He told himself that. He had structured compensation, optimized revenue streams, rewarded himself for leadership. The trust had allowed discretionary spending. Hadn't it? He opened the trust document and scrolled. Discretionary authority subject to fiduciary standard of care and loyalty. Loyalty. The word lingered. Loyalty to whom? The property, the beneficiaries, or to himself? Downstairs, a guest approached Lauren. "Is Mr. Hawkins available?" the guest asked. "He's in meetings," Lauren replied smoothly. As the guest walked away, Lauren glanced toward the balcony. Gregory stood there again, overlooking the lobby. But something in his posture had changed. Less command, more calculation. Across town, Hailey closed her notebook after adding one final entry for the day: internal resistance to narrative alteration. She placed the pen carefully in its slot. This was no longer about humiliation in a lobby. It was about governance, about the difference between performance and accountability. Gregory believed leadership insulated him. Hailey understood leadership obligated him. By Friday, the trustee meeting would formalize what documentation had already outlined. The Hawthorne Hotel continued to glow warmly against Denver's cooling evening air. Guests would never know that beneath the marble floors and curated lighting, a structural correction was unfolding. Not loud, not theatrical, just precise. And precision, once set in motion, does not retreat. By Thursday morning, the numbers had stopped looking abstract. They had become directional. Olivia Chen sat in her office with 3 monitors open, cross-referencing ledger entries against vendor registrations and travel reimbursements. The Hawthorne's revenue remained healthy occupancy, steady seasonal packages profitable, but beneath the surface a pattern ran like a quiet current. GH Consulting LLC. In isolation, each payment could be defended. Strategic advisory, brand positioning, expansion feasibility review. But stacked together across 3 fiscal years, the transfers formed a staircase, incremental, predictable, upward. Olivia printed a full-year summary and highlighted the recurring payment schedule. The transfers often aligned with months where executive suite charges had been waived for private partners. She pulled those comped reservations next. Guest names varied, but billing addresses occasionally matched consulting invoice addresses, not identical. Close enough to require explanation. She did not speculate. She compiled. Downstairs, Gregory moved through the lobby with contained focus. He stopped briefly at the concierge desk, offering guidance on a corporate account renewal. He corrected a floral placement with quiet authority. He was reinforcing normalcy. He needed the building to feel intact. At 10:13 a.m., his phone buzzed. Email from the external audit liaison. Subject trustee meeting documentation confirmation. The list of requested materials was exhaustive: 3-year consulting agreements, vendor contracts and amendments, executive compensation schedules, all CCTV footage from 4:0050 p.m. Monday, incident reports and revisions, server access logs. Gregory stared at the screen. This was no longer a contained dispute. It was structured review. He forwarded the email to Olivia with a brief message. Prepare required documentation. She replied within minutes, already compiling. There was no edge in her tone, just process. Across town, Hailey reviewed the same documentation checklist in Caroline Pierce's office. Caroline stood by the window, overlooking a narrow Denver street lined with brick storefronts. By tomorrow, Caroline said, the board will see the pattern clearly. Hailey nodded. And the consulting entity confirmed under Gregory's sole control. Any evidence of misclassification, Caroline flipped through her file. Several transfers categorized under operational consulting appear to coincide with personal travel reimbursements. Hailey did not respond immediately. She looked down at her notebook. She had written a single word across the top of a fresh page. Alignment. Money. Authority. Statement. When someone publicly denies ownership while privately benefiting from ownership, structure's alignment matters. Back at the Hawthorne, Marcus Doyle received a secure message from IT. Audit team granted view-only access to preserved footage. He opened the file once more. He watched Hailey standing still, Gregory's hand lifting. The directive. She doesn't own this place. Marcus muted the audio and studied body language. Hailey had not argued, had not raised her hands, had not escalated. Security removal without disruptive behavior. The distinction would matter in board deliberation. He added a supplemental observation note. No visible operational interference observed prior to directive. Saved, archived. In maintenance, Daniel Brooks reviewed server access logs. He printed a report showing that Gregory had attempted to access archived footage after the legal hold notice. Access attempts logged, no deletion, but logged. Daniel placed the report into the audit folder. No commentary, just data. By mid-afternoon, Olivia requested a brief meeting with Gregory. He gestured for her to sit. She placed the compiled financial summary on his desk. "I've outlined consulting transfers here," she said evenly. "The total over 3 years approaches $500,000. Gregory leaned back. "That's cumulative advisory compensation to an entity you control." He held her gaze. It was disclosed. Disclosed, she agreed, but not co-signed. Silence. "The trust instrument requires fiduciary loyalty," she added carefully. "Related party transactions require transparency." Gregory's tone hardened slightly. "Are you questioning my loyalty? I'm outlining audit exposure." Her voice remained level. Gregory closed the folder. "Prepare the documentation as requested." Olivia nodded. As she left, she understood something clearly. He did not see this as breach. He saw it as entitlement. That distinction would decide the outcome. Across town, Hailey returned home briefly before the evening strategy call with Caroline. The house was quiet. She placed the audit checklist on the kitchen table and stood by the window. She did not feel vindicated. There was no satisfaction in uncovering misalignment inside something she had helped build. But there was clarity. Clarity was steadier than anger. Her phone buzzed. "Caroline again." "New development," Caroline said when Hailey answered. "Board chair requested direct transcript of the lobby statement." Hailey's voice remained even. "They will receive it." "Yes, and the financial cross-reference." "Good." Caroline paused. "Are you prepared for suspension vote tomorrow?" "Yes." No hesitation. Back at the Hawthorne, Gregory sat alone in his office reviewing the consulting contract he had drafted 3 years earlier. GH Consulting provided executive oversight, strategic advisory, expansion analysis. The language was defensible. But intent would be examined. He tapped his pen against the desk. He had never thought Hailey would activate the trustee clause. She had always preferred structure over spotlight. He mistook that for reluctance. He stood and walked to the balcony again. Guests filled the bar below, unaware. The Hawthorne looked unchanged. But Gregory felt something narrowing around him. Constraint, not from hostility, but from documentation. He replayed Monday in his mind. If he had handled the moment differently, if he had not spoken publicly, if he had waited. But words spoken in certainty rarely retract cleanly. Downstairs, Lauren updated the courier log for an additional document pickup scheduled the next morning. Audit materials. She moved through her tasks with measured professionalism. But she watched. She had seen power shift before in smaller ways. She knew the signs. When directives became more frequent, when reassurances became louder, when documentation multiplied quietly. At 6:47 p.m., Marcus closed his workstation for the night. Before logging out, he ensured all footage related to Monday remained under legal hold with backup redundancy. He did not trust assumptions. He trusted redundancy. In finance, Olivia locked the compiled audit binder in her cabinet. She would bring it to the trustee meeting herself. No digital-only submissions. Hard copy carried weight. Across town, Hailey sat at her dining table one last time that evening. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Consulting total confirmed. Related party alignment established. Public denial transcript requested by board." She closed the book gently. Tomorrow, governance would speak. Not loudly, not emotionally. Through vote. Gregory believed leadership could absorb scrutiny. Hailey understood leadership must withstand it. The Hawthorne Hotel continued its evening rhythm. Reservations processed. Wine poured, keys exchanged. From the outside, nothing fractured. Inside, alignment was nearing conclusion. And once alignment becomes visible, it does not require volume to prevail. Friday arrived without spectacle. Denver's morning sky carried a muted gray, the kind that pressed gently against glass, but promised nothing dramatic. The Hawthorne opened its doors at 6:00 a.m., as it always did. Coffee brewed. Night audit reports printed. Housekeeping carts rolled down carpeted corridors. Governance rarely announces itself with thunder. It schedules a meeting. At 9:00 a.m., the trustee session convened in a private conference suite 2 floors above the lobby. Present in person, Hailey Hawkins, trustee; Caroline Pierce, legal counsel; Olivia Chen, director of finance. Present via secure video, Martin Ellsworth, board chair; 2 additional trust advisors. Gregory arrived at 9:03 a.m. He wore a navy suit he typically reserved for investor meetings. His posture was upright, composed. If anyone passing by had seen him, they would have assumed routine strategy discussion. He took his seat across from Hailey. For the first time since Monday, they faced each other across a table not as husband and wife, but as fiduciary parties. Hailey's expression was calm. She did not greet him with hostility. She inclined her head once. Caroline opened the meeting. "This session is convened under Section 4.2b of the Hawthorne Family Trust Instrument," she began. "Purpose review of managing member conduct and related party transactions." Gregory folded his hands neatly. "I welcome transparency," he said. His voice was measured. Martin Ellsworth's image flickered slightly on the screen. "Let's proceed," the board chair said. Olivia distributed hard copy binders. Inside were tabbed sections, consulting transfers, vendor cross-reference, executive suite comp records, incident documentation, audio transcript. Gregory did not reach for the binder immediately. He waited. Caroline began with finances. Over a 3-year period, she said $482,000 was transferred to GH Consulting LLC. Corporate filings confirmed sole control by Gregory Hawkins. Gregory nodded. "That is correct. It was disclosed as strategic advisory compensation." "Was trustee co-signature obtained for related party approval?" Caroline asked. Gregory's jaw shifted slightly. "The trust grants discretionary authority to the managing member." Caroline did not argue. She turned to the printed clause. "Discretionary authority remains subject to fiduciary loyalty and conflict disclosure requiring trustee acknowledgement." Silence followed. Martin Ellsworth leaned closer to his camera. "Gregory, were these transactions explicitly disclosed to Hailey as trustee?" Gregory's pause lasted half a second too long. "They were included in financial summaries." "That is not the same as disclosure of related party interest," Martin replied evenly. Hailey remained still. She did not interject. She allowed the documentation to speak. Caroline turned to the next tab. Comped executive suites corresponding with consulting invoice months. Olivia clarified, in multiple instances rooms were waived for individuals connected to vendor addresses associated with GH Consulting. Gregory exhaled slowly. "Client cultivation is part of growth." "At trustee expense?" Martin asked. Gregory did not respond immediately. Caroline moved to the final tab. Incident documentation from Monday. Gregory's posture tightened. "The relevance?" he asked. Caroline met his gaze. "Ownership denial has material impact in fiduciary review." She slid a printed transcript across the table. Timestamp 4:24:38 p.m. Gregory Hawkins. "She doesn't own this place." The room was quiet enough to hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Gregory's eyes moved across the page. "I was referring to operational authority," he said. Marcus Doyle entered quietly at Caroline's request. He stood near the door. Caroline asked him one question. Did Miss Hawkins exhibit disruptive behavior prior to directive? No. Marcus replied. Did you observe trespassing conduct? No. Was removal ordered solely by Mr. Hawkins? Yes. Marcus stepped back. Gregory's jaw tightened further. This is being reframed unfairly. No, Martin said from the screen. It is being reviewed. Hailey's hands rested lightly on the table. She spoke for the first time. I requested expense ledger access. Her voice was level. You responded by removing me publicly and denying ownership. Gregory's gaze met hers. You blindsided operations. I exercised trustee oversight. Silence again. Caroline addressed the board. The cumulative alignment of financial transfers, related party interest, and public denial of trustee authority establishes credible concern regarding fiduciary standard compliance. Martin Ellsworth nodded slowly. Gregory, he said, do you contest the financial data? No. Do you contest ownership structure? No. Do you contest the statement made? Gregory hesitated. No. That single syllable settled heavily in the room. Martin leaned back in his chair. Then we proceed to motion. Caroline placed the formal motion on the table. Temporary suspension of managing member authority pending full independent audit. Gregory's eyes shifted sharply. This is excessive. It is procedural, Martin replied, based on documented exposure. Gregory looked toward Hailey. You're dismantling your own operation. Hailey's voice did not waver. I am protecting it. The vote proceeded. Martin in favor. Advisor 1. In favor. Advisor 2. In favor. Trustee in favor. Unanimous. Gregory remained seated. He did not raise his voice. He did not strike the table. He inhaled slowly. Authority, once assumed permanent, had been recalibrated in under 40 minutes. Caroline concluded, effective immediately financial authority transitions to trustee oversight. Gregory Hawkins remains an operational consultant pending audit findings. Operational consultant. The phrase was deliberate, not humiliation, reclassification. Gregory stood. I will cooperate, he said evenly. His composure returned externally intact. But something essential had shifted. He exited the room without further comment. In the hallway outside, guests walked past, unaware that structural authority inside the building had just changed. Inside the conference suite, Hailey remained seated a moment longer. No triumph crossed her face, only acknowledgement. Olivia gathered the binders carefully. Marcus nodded once to Hailey before leaving. Caroline closed her folder. It's done, she said quietly. For now. Hailey rose. She smoothed the edge of her notebook. Thank you. Caroline watched her closely. Are you prepared for next steps? Yes. Gregory may attempt negotiation. He's entitled to counsel. Hailey's tone carried no bitterness, just clarity. Downstairs, Gregory walked through the lobby. Staff sensed the shift immediately, not because anyone announced it, but because posture changes. Gregory no longer walked ahead of everyone. He walked through. Lauren watched from behind the desk. He did not meet her eyes. Olivia stepped forward. Financial authorizations now require trustee sign-off, she said calmly. Gregory nodded. Understood. The words sounded controlled, professional, contained. In the security office, Marcus updated the internal status log. Managing member authority suspended pending audit. He saved the entry. Upstairs, Hailey stepped into the lobby for the first time since Monday. No one stopped her. No one questioned her presence. She did not pause at the center of the room. She did not look around for acknowledgement. She walked directly to the elevator. Quiet strength does not require witness. It requires alignment. Gregory had believed control lived in command. Hailey had allowed documentation to recalibrate it. The Hawthorne Hotel continued operating. Guests checked in. Keys were issued. Wine was poured. From the outside, nothing appeared altered. But inside its governance structure, ownership had spoken. Not loudly, not emotionally, precisely. The word suspended did not echo through the Hawthorne. It did not need to. By Monday morning, the operational shift had settled into routine. All outgoing transfers above $10,000 now required trustee authorization. Vendor approvals rerouted through Olivia Chen and copied to Caroline Pierce's firm. IT had implemented dual access requirements for financial dashboards. Nothing visible had changed in the lobby. But access is architecture, and architecture determines movement. Gregory arrived at 8:05 a.m. as he always had, but the rhythm felt altered. He paused at the front desk longer than usual, reviewing reservation metrics without commentary. He offered a short nod to Lauren. She returned it professionally. No deference, no distance, just neutrality. Neutrality unsettled him more than resistance. Upstairs, Hailey sat in the glass-walled conference office that had once been Gregory's preferred strategy room. She had not claimed his office. She had not removed his nameplate. She had simply begun working. Her notebook lay open beside a stack of audit summaries. Caroline joined by speakerphone. "Discovery phase begins today," Caroline said. "We'll initiate formal deposition scheduling." Hailey nodded, though Caroline could not see her. "Timeline within 10 days. We want testimony under oath before narratives evolve." Hailey understood the implication. Stories reshape when unrecorded. Testimony under oath crystallizes them. At 10:12 a.m., Gregory received official notice of deposition scheduling. He read the email twice. Subject, deposition. Gregory Hawkins. He forwarded it to his attorney, Mark Caldwell, a litigator with a reputation for aggressive defense. Within the hour, Mark arrived in person. They met in Gregory's office, door closed. "This is Fiduciary review," Mark said after scanning the documentation. "Not criminal. Yet." Gregory's jaw tightened slightly. "I acted within discretionary authority. Related party transactions complicate that," Mark replied. "They were disclosed. Were they approved?" Gregory did not answer immediately. Mark leaned back. "And the lobby incident," Gregory exhaled. "It was personal. Everything is personal until it's documented," Mark said evenly. Silence followed. Downstairs, Marcus coordinated with IT to export authenticated copies of Monday's footage for legal submission. Each file required chain of custody certification. He printed the documentation, carefully signing each page. Marcus had testified in court before. He understood process. Process did not care about personality. At noon, Olivia entered Hailey's temporary office with updated reconciliation sheets. "We've identified 12 transfers that coincide directly with comped suite stays," she said. Hailey reviewed the sheet. Dates aligned precisely. "Are those stays linked to vendor relationships?" Hailey asked. "In 3 cases, yes. In others, indirect association through shared addresses." Hailey underlined 2 dates in her notebook. No commentary, just confirmation. At 2:00 p.m., Gregory met privately with Mark again to rehearse potential deposition questions. "Did you deny trustee ownership publicly?" Mark asked bluntly. "I clarified operational authority. That's not the question." Gregory's eyes flickered. "Yes," he admitted. "Why, I was preventing disruption?" "Was there disruption?" Gregory paused. "No." Mark closed his notebook. "Then that statement weakens your position." Gregory stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. "I built this hotel." Mark's voice remained level. "You managed it. Ownership is separate." Gregory did not respond. Across the hall, Hailey prepared her own documentation package for deposition. Caroline had advised minimal speaking. Answer directly, no elaboration, no accusation. Hailey did not require rehearsal. Her memory operated in timestamps. 4:24 p.m. Preservation notice, 9:12 a.m. Board vote unanimous. She did not need dramatics. Facts were sufficient. Later that afternoon, a subtle moment unfolded in the lobby. A corporate guest approached the desk. "I'd like to speak to the owner regarding event partnership," he said. Lauren hesitated for half a breath. "Miss Hawkins is available by appointment," she replied smoothly. Gregory heard the exchange from across the lobby. He did not correct it. He walked past without comment. Presence had shifted, not loudly, not ceremonially, but definitively. At 4:15 p.m., deposition transcripts from preliminary witness statements began arriving electronically. Marcus's statement was concise. No disruptive behavior observed. Removal ordered by Gregory Hawkins. Statement denying ownership audible. Olivia's was equally direct. Consulting entity controlled solely by Gregory Hawkins. Trustee approval not documented. Lauren's statement submitted through counsel. Confirmed email instructions labeling Hailey unauthorized. Gregory read each one. He did not lash out. He did not summon them. He simply absorbed. The pattern was forming beyond his narrative. By early evening, Hailey requested a brief walkthrough of the Hawthorne's executive floor. Not as confrontation, as assessment. She walked through the corridor with Olivia. Rooms were immaculate. Staff greeted her respectfully. She paused outside the largest suite, the one most frequently comped. She glanced at the occupancy log Olivia carried. Dates circled in pale ink, aligned with consulting transfers. Hailey did not sigh. She did not shake her head. She turned the page and continued walking. In Gregory's office, Mark gathered his briefcase. "You can negotiate settlement," he said. "Resign managing authority voluntarily in exchange for retained equity." Gregory's voice was controlled. "And concede breach, mitigate exposure." Gregory stared at the desk. "I didn't steal. Intent won't define this," Mark replied. "Documentation will." After Mark left, Gregory remained seated in silence. The Hawthorne's evening lights glowed against glass walls. He had believed performance equaled entitlement. He had believed presence equaled ownership. But presence does not override paperwork. Upstairs, Hailey closed her notebook at 6:42 p.m. She had walked every floor, reviewed every summary, confirmed every timestamp. There was no satisfaction in it, only alignment. Caroline called once more. "Deposition set for Thursday," she said. "Understood. Are you ready?" "Yes." There was no tremor in her voice. Downstairs, Gregory stepped into the lobby once more before leaving. Guests moved through the space, unaware of legal procedures unfolding above them. He paused near the marble column where Hailey had stood days earlier. The spot looked unchanged, but he remembered the stillness in her posture. He had mistaken it for weakness. It had been preparation. He exited the building without looking back. Inside, the Hawthorne continued its quiet rhythm. Governance does not shout. It schedules. It documents. It questions under oath. And by the time voices rise, outcomes are already structured. Hailey turned off the conference room lights and stepped into the elevator. She did not linger in the lobby. She did not seek acknowledgement. Justice, when procedural, rarely feels dramatic. It feels precise. Depositions rarely resemble courtroom drama. There are no raised voices, no dramatic objections shouted across polished floors. There is a table, a court reporter, a camera, a clock, and questions that do not blink. Gregory sat at the far end of the conference room in Pierce and Whitmore's downtown office on Thursday morning at 9:01 a.m. His attorney, Mark Caldwell, sat to his right. A videographer adjusted framing. The court reporter tested her stenography keys. Across from him sat Caroline Pierce. Hailey was not present. That had been deliberate. This was not a confrontation between spouses. It was sworn testimony. The oath was administered. Gregory raised his right hand. He affirmed. Caroline began with neutral cadence. "State your name for the record." "Gregory Thomas Hawkins. Position with Hawthorne Hospitality Group Managing Member. Currently suspended pending trustee review." A slight pause. "Yes." Caroline nodded once. "We will begin with financial documentation." Binders were opened, exhibits marked. Exhibit 4, AGH Consulting LLC Formation Documents. Exhibit 4, B 3-year transfer summary totaling $482,000. "Is GH Consulting wholly owned by you?" Caroline asked. "Yes." Did you disclose related party interest to the trustee prior to transfers? It was included in financial reporting. That is not my question. Gregory's jaw shifted slightly. No formal disclosure separate from reporting. Did the trust instrument require acknowledgement of related party transactions? Mark Caldwell interjected. Objection. Calls for legal conclusion. Caroline adjusted. Were you aware that related party transactions required trustee acknowledgement? Gregory inhaled. I was aware of fiduciary standards. Please answer the question. Yes, he said at last. The court reporter's fingers moved steadily. Caroline shifted to the executive suite records. On multiple occasions, executive suites were comped during months when consulting invoices were issued. Were those stays related to your consulting clients? They were business cultivation. Were they approved by the trustee? Now silence settled briefly in the room. Caroline moved to the final exhibit, Exhibit 9C. Transcript of lobby audio. On Monday, at approximately 4:24 p.m., did you state she doesn't own this place? Gregory did not answer immediately. Mark Caldwell leaned toward him slightly but said nothing. Yes, Gregory replied. In reference to whom? To Hailey Hawkins. Was she trustee at that time? Yes. Did she hold ownership interest through the trust? Yes. Caroline did not raise her voice. Why did you state she did not own the property? Gregory exhaled slowly. I was referring to operational control. Did she exhibit disruptive behavior prior to removal? No. Did you order security to remove her? Yes. Was that removal based on legal trespass? I believed it was within my authority. Authority as what managing member? Not as owner. Gregory hesitated. Correct. The answer hung in the room longer than any raised voice could have. Caroline closed the binder. No further questions at this time. Gregory remained still. The deposition had lasted 93 minutes. There had been no spectacle, but each answer had narrowed interpretation. Outside the conference room, Hailey sat in a separate office, reviewing her own set of documents. She had not listened in. She did not need to. Caroline entered 40 minutes later. It went as expected, she said. Hailey looked up. He acknowledged ownership. Yes. And denial. Yes. And lack of co-signature. Yes. Hailey nodded once. Not relief, confirmation. Next step, she asked. Independent audit review report, Caroline replied. Then potential settlement discussion. Back at the Hawthorne, staff sensed the shift without knowing deposition details. Gregory returned just before noon. He walked through the lobby slower than usual. He greeted no one. In his office, he closed the door and stood motionless for nearly a full minute. He replayed the questions in his mind, each one precise, each one framed without accusation. He had not lied. He had answered directly. And in doing so, he had removed ambiguity. Ambiguity had been his shield. Clarity now defined the landscape. In the security office, Marcus received confirmation that deposition testimony aligned with his incident report. He logged the update quietly. In finance, Olivia finalized her reconciliation summary for independent auditors. Her role remained steady. Data does not waver with emotion. At 3:40 p.m., Mark Caldwell called Gregory. They'll push for negotiated resignation of managing authority, Mark said. And equity retained likely, but diminished operational control. Gregory looked out at the Denver skyline beyond his office window. This is over a technicality. It's over governance, Mark replied evenly. Silence lingered. You can fight, Mark added. But the documentation is aligned. Aligned. The word echoed. Downstairs, Hailey walked into the lobby again that afternoon, not for display, for observation. Lauren noticed her first. Good afternoon, Miss Hawkins, she said calmly. Good afternoon, Hailey replied. No tension, no forced warmth, professional recognition. Marcus nodded from across the room. Hailey walked toward the marble column where she had stood days earlier. She paused there briefly, not in memory, but in measurement. The lobby looked identical, but posture around her had shifted. She was no longer an intrusion. She was governance embodied. Gregory stepped out of his office and saw her. Their eyes met. He approached slowly. This didn't have to escalate, he said quietly. It followed process, Hailey replied. You could have spoken to me. I did. Silence passed between them. You've damaged perception, Gregory said. No, she answered evenly. Documentation did. He studied her face. No anger, no triumph, just certainty. I built this, he said again. You managed it, she replied. Ownership was always clear. Gregory exhaled sharply. For the first time, his voice carried something unguarded. You think I stole from you? I think you believed you were entitled, she said. That landed heavier than accusation. He had no immediate answer. Guests passed behind them, unaware. Hailey glanced toward the elevator. The audit will conclude soon, she said. You'll have options. Options to step aside. Options to correct. Gregory's shoulders lowered slightly. Correction implied acknowledgement. And acknowledgement required surrendering narrative. Hailey turned toward the elevator without waiting for reply. She did not watch his reaction. She did not need to. Upstairs, she entered the conference room and closed her notebook. She wrote only one line. Deposition complete. Alignment confirmed. Justice, when built through documentation, does not roar. It accumulates until denial becomes unsustainable. In his office, Gregory sat down slowly. For the first time, the outcome felt inevitable. Not because Hailey had shouted, not because staff had revolted, but because he had answered questions under oath. And answers once recorded do not retract. The independent audit report arrived the following Tuesday at 8:37 a.m. It was not dramatic in presentation. A sealed envelope, 36 pages, appendices tabbed in careful order. Olivia carried it personally to the conference room where Hailey and Caroline were waiting. Gregory had been notified to attend. He entered at 8:42 a.m., face composed, movements deliberate. No one exchanged pleasantries. The audit partner, a gray-haired woman named Sandra Whitmore, joined via secure video link. We will summarize findings, Sandra began calmly. Full documentation available in appendix. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She presented. Finding 1, related party transactions totaling $482,000 were executed without formal trustee acknowledgement in variance with Trust Governance Clause 4.2b. Gregory did not interrupt. Finding 2 executive suite accommodations were comped in correlation with consulting invoice cycles in at least 7 documented instances. Sandra adjusted her glasses slightly. Finding 3, public denial of trustee ownership authority materially increased governance risk and reputational exposure. The phrasing was neutral. The impact was not. Sandra continued. While no criminal fraud was established, fiduciary standards of loyalty and disclosure were not consistently upheld. There it was. Not theft, not embezzlement, breach of standard, which in governance is enough. Caroline turned a page quietly. Recommendation, she asked. Sandra did not hesitate. Permanent separation of managing authority from related party financial discretion. Governance restructuring advised. Gregory's hands tightened slightly on the table. Separation, he repeated. Yes, Sandra said. Operational leadership should be distinct from financial beneficiary interest to avoid future exposure. Silence filled the room. Hailey spoke after a moment. What options are available to implement that recommendation? Caroline answered. Voluntary resignation of managing authority with retained equity, or formal removal under trustee vote. Gregory looked directly at Hailey. You planned this. She met his gaze steadily. I documented this. The distinction mattered. Gregory leaned back. And if I refuse, Caroline's tone remained measured. The board will reconvene. Removal will proceed. The audit partner signed off. The video feed darkened. The room felt smaller. Gregory stood. I need time, he said. You have 48 hours, Caroline replied. He nodded once and left the room. Outside, the Hawthorne's lobby remained calm. Guests checked out. Luggage carts rolled. No one sensed structural governance being rewritten upstairs. In his office, Gregory closed the door and sat heavily in his chair. 48 hours. He replayed the audit language in his mind. No criminal fraud, breach of fiduciary standard. The word stung differently than accusation would have. He had believed growth justified autonomy. He had believed leadership permitted latitude. But governance did not measure belief. It measured compliance. He opened his email. 2 messages from Mark Caldwell awaited him. Call me. Settlement terms drafted. Gregory stared at the screen. Settlement. The word felt like concession. Across the hall, Hailey remained seated after the meeting. She did not rush. She did not call anyone. She simply reviewed the audit summary once more. Her father's voice echoed faintly in memory. Never build something that depends on charm. Charm fades. Paper lasts. She closed the folder gently. Olivia entered again. What now, she asked. Continuity, Hailey replied. Staff operations remain unchanged. Olivia nodded. Stability would matter. At noon, Gregory walked through the lobby slowly. He stopped at the marble column again. He could almost see the moment replaying. She doesn't own this place. The certainty in his voice then contrasted sharply with the narrowing reality now. Lauren watched him from the desk, not with judgment, with observation. Authority was no longer assumed. It was transitional. Later that afternoon, Hailey made a decision. She would return to the Hawthorne publicly, not to confront, but to stand without challenge. At 3:05 p.m., she entered the lobby through the revolving doors. No security approached. No hesitation rippled through the staff. She walked across the marble floor without obstruction. Gregory saw her immediately. He stepped forward. This is unnecessary, he said quietly. It's not about you, she replied. She turned to Marcus. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, miss, Hawkins Marcus said calmly. Gregory exhaled. Are you trying to humiliate me? Hailey's expression did not change. No. She looked around the lobby. This building doesn't belong to pride. It belongs to structure. The sentence settled quietly. Gregory's shoulders lowered slightly. You could have spoken to me privately, he said again. I asked for the ledger, she replied. Silence. Guests passed by unaware. Hailey turned toward the conference elevator. I'll be upstairs. She did not linger. She did not seek acknowledgement. Gregory remained standing near the column. For the first time since Monday, he did not feel defensive. He felt cornered by his own assumptions. In the conference room, Hailey met briefly with department heads. Not to criticize, to reassure. Operations remain stable, she said evenly. This is governance correction, not operational collapse. Rachel Kim nodded. Olivia added payroll and vendor payments remain uninterrupted. Marcus remained steady. Daniel stood quietly in the back. There was no applause, no tension, just adjustment. As the meeting ended, Lauren approached Hailey privately. I just wanted to say, thank you for handling this professionally, she said softly. Hailey regarded her carefully. Documentation protects everyone, she replied. Lauren nodded. That sentence carried weight. At 5:48 p.m., Gregory called Mark Caldwell. Send the settlement draft, he said. Are you prepared to sign, Mark asked. Yes. There was no anger in his voice now, just inevitability. That evening, Hailey sat at her dining table once more. The audit report lay beside her notebook. She wrote, Audit confirmed, separation pending, no retaliation. She closed the notebook. There was no satisfaction in this, only correction. Gregory would retain equity. He would step aside from managing authority. The Hawthorne would continue. Governance would be restructured, and no one would stand in the lobby announcing victory. Because victory was not the point. Alignment was. Back at the Hawthorne, Gregory remained in his office long after sunset. He looked around at the walls he had decorated, the schedules he had controlled, the presence he had curated. Control had felt permanent. It never was. He picked up a pen and signed the preliminary resignation draft. Managing authority relinquished. He set the pen down slowly. Downstairs, the lobby lights glowed warm against glass and stone. Guests sipped wine. Music drifted softly. The building stood as it always had. But ownership had clarified itself. Not loudly, not vindictively, precisely. The final board session was scheduled for Friday at 10:00 a.m. Not to argue, not to revisit evidence, to formalize transition. By then, Gregory had signed the preliminary resignation draft, relinquishing managing authority pending permanent restructuring. The document sat in Caroline Pierce's leather portfolio, tabbed and initialed. The Hawthorne Hotel moved through the week without disruption. Payroll processed on time. Vendor deliveries arrived. Guests left positive reviews online, unaware that governance had been recalibrated 2 floors above their suites. At 9:57 a.m., Hailey entered the conference room. She carried only her notebook. Gregory arrived moments later, jacket buttoned, expression composed. Mark Caldwell followed, briefcase in hand. Board members joined via secure video link. Martin Ellsworth began. This session formalizes restructuring following independent audit findings. His tone was calm, businesslike. Caroline placed the signed resignation draft on the table. Mr. Hawkins has agreed to step down from managing authority, effective immediately, retaining equity interest under revised governance structure. Martin nodded. Gregory, do you affirm this voluntarily? Gregory met the camera. Yes. No hesitation, no visible resentment, just acknowledgement. Caroline continued. The new structure separates operational leadership from financial oversight. Trustee retains authority. Independent general manager to be appointed within 30 days. Olivia Chen sat quietly beside Hailey, her posture steady. Martin turned toward Hailey. Miss Hawkins, do you accept interim operational oversight until appointment? Yes, she replied. Do you commit to preserving equity distribution in accordance with trust terms? Yes. The word carried no triumph, only duty. Mark Caldwell cleared his throat lightly. We request confirmation that no further punitive claims will be pursued, absent evidence of criminal intent. Caroline answered evenly. The audit found no criminal fraud. Civil fiduciary breach addressed through restructuring. Martin concluded, then this matter is resolved pending final documentation filing. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. No raised voices, no final accusations, just signatures. Gregory signed the final resignation document slowly. The sound of pen against paper felt heavier than any confrontation could have. When he finished, he slid the document back toward Caroline. That concludes my operational role, he said. Caroline inclined her head. Yes. Silence lingered briefly. Then Martin signed off from the video feed. The screen went dark. The conference room seemed larger afterward. Gregory stood first. He looked at Hailey. For a moment, the room held only them. You didn't need to make it public, he said quietly. It wasn't public, she replied. It was procedural. He exhaled. I thought I earned more latitude. You earned trust, she said, not ownership. The distinction was final. He nodded once. I won't contest. I know, she replied. No bitterness lingered in her voice. No apology in his. Just recognition of outcome. Gregory turned and left the conference room without looking back. Hailey remained seated for several seconds after the door closed. Olivia gathered the signed documents carefully. It's done, she said softly. Hailey nodded. Yes, not victory, completion. Downstairs, the lobby continued its rhythm. Lauren processed a late checkout request. Marcus monitored security feeds. Daniel supervised a minor plumbing repair in Suite 804. At 11:23 a.m., Gregory walked through the lobby one last time as managing member in name. No announcement preceded him. No one stared. But staff sensed closure in subtle ways. Marcus stepped forward. Take care, he said simply. Gregory nodded. You too. Lauren offered a polite smile. Best wishes, she said. Gregory paused for half a second. Thank you. He exited through the revolving doors without spectacle. Outside, Denver's autumn air carried a crisp clarity. He did not linger on the sidewalk. He did not glance back at the Hawthorne's facade. He walked toward his car and drove away. Inside, Hailey stepped into the lobby for the first time after formalization. No one parted awkwardly. No one hesitated. She did not occupy the center of the room. She walked directly to the concierge desk. "Is the conference suite ready for the independent manager interviews next week?" she asked. Rachel Kim nodded. "Yes, Miss Hawkins, good." Hailey turned toward Olivia. "Prepare transitional briefing materials." Olivia nodded. Work continued. There was no celebratory toast, no applause, only movement forward. Later that afternoon, Hailey entered Gregory's former office. She did not sit behind the desk immediately. She stood by the window first. The view of the Denver skyline looked unchanged. But the room felt different, less performative, more structural. She walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside lay pens folders and a framed photograph from the hotel's grand reopening 5 years earlier. Gregory stood in the center of that photograph, arm around her shoulders. She regarded it quietly, then she placed it gently into a storage box without comment. Not discarded, archived. Caroline entered moments later. "All filings will be submitted by end of day," she said. "Thank you," Hailey replied. Caroline studied her face. No satisfaction. Hailey's expression remained composed. Satisfaction would imply loss, she said. This was correction. Caroline nodded once. That word again. Correction. In the lobby, a guest approached Hailey directly. "Are you the owner?" the woman asked politely. Hailey paused. "Yes," she said simply. No elaboration, no performance. The guest smiled. "It's a beautiful property." "Thank you," Hailey replied. The exchange lasted less than 15 seconds. But it felt different from Monday's directive. Ownership, when stated quietly, required no defense. At 6:12 p.m., Hailey closed the office for the evening. She walked through the lobby one last time that day. She did not stop at the marble column. She did not revisit the moment of removal, because that moment no longer defined the structure. Governance did. Documentation did. Alignment did. The Hawthorne Hotel stood as it always had, refined, composed, profitable. But its authority had shifted back to the lines written long before the chandeliers were installed. Hailey stepped outside into the cool Denver evening. She did not feel triumphant. She felt steady. Gregory had not been destroyed. He had been corrected. The hotel had not collapsed. It had been clarified. And clarity, once established, does not require applause. It requires maintenance. Restructuring does not end when signatures dry. It begins. The Monday after Gregory's formal resignation, the Hawthorne held its first leadership briefing under revised governance. Not in the large conference suite reserved for investors, but in the smaller strategy room with glass walls and a long oak table. Hailey stood at the head of the table, not because she sought the position, but because the structure required a focal point. Olivia Chen sat to her right. Rachel Kim, Marcus Doyle, Daniel Brooks, and department supervisors filled the remaining seats. There was no ceremonial language, no speeches about new eras. Hailey opened a thin folder. "Operations continue without interruption," she said evenly. "Payroll and vendor schedules remain intact. Guest experience remains unchanged." The room relaxed slightly. She continued, "2 adjustments are effective immediately." She did not rush. First, all related party transactions require trustee disclosure and board acknowledgement. No exceptions. Olivia nodded once. Second, security removal protocol now requires documented behavioral justification and secondary supervisory confirmation before action. Marcus met her gaze. Understood. Hailey held it for a moment longer. No individual guest vendor or trustee will be removed without documented cause. The phrasing was deliberate. No reference to Monday. No direct mention of Gregory. But the correction was embedded. Rachel spoke carefully. "Will there be communication to staff about the leadership change?" "Yes," Hailey replied. "A brief internal memo. Transparent, non-accusatory." She closed the folder. "That's all." The meeting ended in under 15 minutes. No applause, no tension, just clarity. Later that afternoon, Hailey drafted the internal memo herself. Subject governance update. Effective immediately. Operational leadership is transitioning under trustee oversight, pending appointment of independent general manager. Our commitment to transparency, professionalism, and guest experience remains unchanged. We appreciate your continued dedication. No explanation of audit findings. No narrative about misconduct. Just alignment. She sent it. Across the lobby, Lauren read the memo quietly. It did not dramatize events. It did not diminish them. It simply acknowledged structure. Marcus printed the updated security protocol and pinned it discreetly to the internal operations board. Daniel updated server access permissions to reflect revised authority. Change moved through the building, not like a storm, but like recalibration. By Wednesday, candidates for independent general manager interviews began arriving. Hailey did not sit in the interviews alone. Olivia joined. So did Rachel. Governance now required shared oversight. During one interview, a candidate asked, "May I ask why the leadership transition occurred?" Hailey answered without hesitation. Governance realignment, no embellishment. The candidate nodded. That was enough. Meanwhile, Gregory finalized terms of his revised equity agreement at Mark Caldwell's office downtown. He retained financial interest. He relinquished operational authority permanently. He signed without argument. The fight he once imagined mounting had dissolved in documentation. When he left Mark's office, he did not drive toward the Hawthorne. He drove in the opposite direction. Back at the hotel, Hailey conducted a quiet walkthrough with Marcus late one evening. The lobby lights were dimmed. Guests had retreated to rooms. Jazz had faded into instrumental piano. They paused near the marble column. "This is where it happened," Marcus said quietly. Hailey nodded. "Yes." Marcus hesitated. "I could have handled it differently." She looked at him calmly. "You handled it accurately." He considered that. Accuracy had felt insufficient that day. Now, it felt essential. "Thank you," he said simply. Hailey inclined her head. "Documentation protects everyone," she replied again. The phrase had become principle. In finance, Olivia finalized updated oversight matrices. No unilateral approvals, no ambiguous categories, clean lines. In guest services, Rachel introduced a new training module titled Professional De-escalation and Documentation. Not in response to scandal, in response to governance. On Friday afternoon, the board confirmed appointment of an independent general manager, Thomas Rivera, a seasoned hospitality executive with no prior ties to Gregory or Hailey. He would begin in 2 weeks. When Hailey informed staff, she did so in person. "Leadership functions best when separated from ownership," she said. "This protects the property and everyone within it." No applause followed. But relief did. Relief is quiet. Gregory visited the Hawthorne once more the following Sunday afternoon, not to reclaim anything, but to retrieve personal items. He coordinated the visit in advance. No secrecy, no surprise. He entered through the side staff entrance. Marcus met him there. "Your things are boxed," Marcus said. Gregory nodded. "Thank you." He carried the box through the lobby. A few guests glanced up, recognizing him vaguely. He did not linger. Near the exit, he saw Hailey speaking with Olivia by the concierge desk. For a moment, he considered walking past without acknowledgement. Instead, he approached. "I won't interfere," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to," Hailey replied. Silence stretched briefly. "You were right about structure," he added. It was not an apology. It was recognition. Hailey regarded him carefully. "Structure was always there," she said. "We just stopped reading it the same way." Gregory nodded once. He turned and exited without another word. Outside, Denver's sky was clear. Inside, the Hawthorne's rhythm continued unbroken. That evening, Hailey returned to her office. Gregory's former office was now labeled Interim Executive Oversight. She had not replaced the furniture. She had not redesigned the space. She had adjusted authority. She opened her notebook. On the final page, she wrote, "Operational separation complete. Security protocol updated. Independent manager appointed." She closed the book slowly. There was no vindication in her posture, no triumph, only steadiness. Justice, when procedural, rarely feels dramatic at the end. It feels administrative. Corrected signatures, revised protocols, clearer boundaries. The Hawthorne Hotel remained beautiful. Its marble columns gleamed. Its chandeliers glowed softly. Guests still described it as refined, welcoming, understated. What they would never know was that behind that refinement, governance had been restored without spectacle, without shouting, without retaliation. Hailey turned off the office lights and walked through the lobby once more. No one stepped aside nervously. No one questioned her presence. She was not reclaiming anything. She was maintaining it. And maintenance, unlike dominance, endures. 2 weeks later, the Hawthorne did not look different. That was the point. The marble still reflected chandelier light in soft arcs across the lobby floor. The scent of bergamot still lingered in the air. Guests still checked in beneath polished brass fixtures without sensing that anything foundational had shifted. But structure had settled. Thomas Rivera, the newly appointed general manager, had begun quietly. He introduced himself to staff individually rather than through a single announcement. He reviewed vendor contracts line by line. He asked Olivia detailed questions about authorization protocols. He did not ask about Gregory. He did not need to. Governance now functioned without personality at its center. On a clear Thursday morning, Hailey arrived at the Hawthorne at 8:15 a.m. She no longer timed her steps. She no longer noted timestamps. There was nothing to document. She walked through the revolving doors and crossed the lobby without hesitation. Lauren greeted her with an easy professionalism. "Good morning, Miss Hawkins." "Good morning," Hailey replied. No tension remained in the exchange, only recognition. Marcus stood near the elevator bank posture, steady as ever. He inclined his head once. Daniel crossed the lobby with a maintenance tablet in hand, nodding respectfully as he passed. There was no ceremonial acknowledgement of her ownership, and she did not seek one. Upstairs, Hailey entered the interim oversight office, soon to be reassigned fully to Thomas Rivera. She placed her leather notebook on the desk one final time. The notebook had grown heavier over the past month. Not physically, historically. She opened it and turned to the first entry made after the lobby incident. 4:25 p.m. Directive issued. Statement recorded. She flipped through subsequent pages. Preservation notice served. Consulting totals confirmed. Deposition complete. Audit aligned. Separation finalized. Each line precise. Each entry unemotional. She closed the notebook gently. Caroline Pierce had called the night before to confirm final filing of governance restructuring documents. "Everything is complete," Carolyn had said. "There are no pending exposures." Hailey had thanked her simply. Completion did not require celebration. It required maintenance. At 9:00 a.m., Thomas knocked lightly on the open office door. "I'll begin weekly reporting this afternoon," he said. "Thank you," Hailey replied. He paused. "If you prefer to remain involved operationally, I don't," she said gently. He nodded. That was understood. Ownership did not require daily presence. It required oversight. Hailey gathered a slim folder from the desk and handed it to Thomas. "Vendor authorization matrix," she said. "And revised security protocol." "I've reviewed both," he replied. "They're solid." Solid. The word settled quietly in the room. Stability had replaced volatility. Thomas left to begin his day. Hailey remained alone for a moment longer. She walked to the window overlooking Denver's skyline. The city moved as it always did. Cars gliding along streets, sunlight reflecting off glass towers. Nothing external signaled the shift that had occurred inside this building. That too was the point. She picked up her notebook and carried it downstairs. In the lobby, a young couple approached the front desk. "We heard this hotel is family-owned," the woman said with a smile. "Is that true?" Lauren glanced toward Hailey instinctively. Hailey answered herself. "Yes," she said calmly. The woman smiled wider. "That's wonderful. It feels cared for." Hailey inclined her head. "It is." The couple moved toward the elevators. Hailey did not elaborate. Care is not loud. It is structured. Marcus approached quietly. "Everything's been smooth," he said. "I'm glad," she replied. He hesitated briefly. "Thank you for how you handled it." Hailey regarded him thoughtfully. "You handled it too," she said. He nodded. They did not discuss Monday again. It no longer required revisiting. At 10:17 a.m., Hailey stepped outside onto the sidewalk in front of the Hawthorne. The same sidewalk where she had stood weeks earlier after being escorted out. The memory did not sting. It clarified. Gregory had called security in confidence that authority followed his voice. He had believed ownership followed presence. He had believed humiliation could be contained. But governance had followed documentation, and documentation had been precise. Gregory had not been publicly disgraced. He had not been removed in spectacle. He had stepped aside under signed agreement. Equity retained. Authority recalibrated. There had been no retaliation, only correction. Hailey glanced once at the building's facade. She did not feel vindicated. Vindication requires bitterness. She felt steady. Her phone vibrated softly. A text from Gregory. "The agreement is filed. I won't interfere moving forward." She read it without visible reaction, then typed a simple response. "I wish you well." No accusation, no reopening of narrative, just closure. She slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. Inside, the Hawthorne continued its rhythm. Guests would never know that the woman who once stood silently while security approached her now owned the authority they assumed had always been visible. They would never know that governance had been restored not by confrontation, but by timestamps, transcripts, and signatures. They would never know how close entitlement had come to redefining structure. And they did not need to. The building was stable. That was enough. Hailey walked down the sidewalk without looking back, not because she was leaving, but because she did not need to monitor what was already aligned. Ownership does not require constant presence. It requires integrity. She crossed the street and paused briefly at the corner. Denver's air felt clear. The process had taken weeks. The correction had taken minutes once documentation aligned. Justice, she had learned again, does not shout. It files, it records, it waits. And when it moves, it does so without spectacle. Hailey continued walking, her posture upright, her pace unhurried. The Hawthorne remained behind her, not as a battlefield won, but as a structure maintained. Dignity restored not by humiliation, but by adherence to the lines written long before voices rose in the lobby. And that was enough. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that quiet strength often speaks louder than anger, take a moment to reflect on where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Justice looks different across cities and time zones, but its foundation is the same: accountability. If you value stories where truth unfolds through documentation rather than drama, consider subscribing. Not for spectacle, but for reminders that dignity, when preserved, does not need to fight loudly to endure. And if you've ever witnessed power corrected without revenge, share your thoughts below. Some stories don't demand applause. They deserve witnesses.